everybody? This is Dream, and today we have a massive 11-game slate for the NBA. We have a lot of injuries on the slate. I'm going to go through my team picks real quick. Portland over the Lakers, Golden State over Washington, Dallas over Minnesota, Oklahoma City over the Pelicans, Chicago over Orlando, New York over Brooklyn, Denver over Miami, Philly over Houston, Utah over Indiana, Cleveland over the Spurs, Atlanta over Charlotte. This slate has a ton of injuries, like I mentioned, so I'm going to get into that. I will be doing FanDuel today again, finally, so keep that in mind as well. For the Spurs, Vassell is out, Trey Jones is out, McDermott is questionable, Keldon Johnson and Sochan are both probable. For the Jazz, Westbrook remains out. For the Pacers, Halliburton and Turner are both questionable. For the Rockets, Porter Jr. is out. For the 76ers, Embiid is questionable. For the Hawks, Collins is questionable and Bogdanovich is questionable. For the Hornets, Oubre is out. For the Nuggets, Murray and Gordon are both questionable. For the Heat, Hero is questionable. Lowry and Oladipo and Robinson are out, and everybody else is probable. For the Nets, Curry is out. For the Knicks, Robinson is out. For the Bulls, Green is out, and Caruso is questionable. For the Pelicans, Zion is out, and McCollum is questionable. For the Thunder, Pokuševski's out, and Trey Mann is questionable. For the Timberwolves, Towns is out, Anderson and Gobert are both questionable. For the Mavs, Tim Hardaway Jr. is questionable, and Cleaver is out. For the Wizards, Kuzma is questionable. And for the Warriors, Curry is out, and Wiggins is questionable. For the Lakers, Bamba is out, LeBron is questionable, and Davis is probable. And for the Trailblazers, last but not least, Grant is questionable, Nurkic and Winslow are both out. So, we have lots of injuries to pay attention to today, and there's already a ton of value available on the slate. So that is going to make this a rather insane slate probably. Plus some of our favorite players to roster typically, like Nikola Jokic, is going against Miami, which is somewhat of a disappointment because he's going to be difficult to use in that situation. But we do have some good matchups as well from some guys. So let's go ahead and get into the slate, and I'll tell you who I like the best today. We're going to start with the Charlotte Hornets backcourt here with Mark Williams and Nick Richards. These two guys are both $4,000 and $3,600. Whichever one of these guys starts, which will likely be Mark Williams today, probably is going to be more likely to be viable. He's had two pretty good games. Though the second game since Plumlee was traded, he didn't do quite as good because Nick Richards played well and got more minutes, and so they're kind of in a timeshare at center now. But they're both still under $4,000, so they both have some good opportunity here. Mark Williams had 5x in both games he played so far. And then Nick Richards, he had 16 and 23 fantasy points in those two games. And so I do think both of them have some viability today. Neither one of them are a must-play because, like I said, they're in a bit of a timeshare, but they are both viable, and they do look interesting. Then we're going to look at Utah here, and we're going to look at Talon Horton Tugger. He looks like he's locked in for a good amount of minutes, somewhere in the 25 to 30 minute range going forward, which gives him nice upside at this price. I don't think his price will stay this cheap for very long. I do also think that he is a must-play today on the slate, and so I look for him to be a great option at shooting guard / small forward for this particular slate. Then we're going to look at Walker Kessler, also on Utah. He seems like his usage is going to rise some and be more locked in on his minutes now that Vanderbilt is gone. And he has his floor also just gets a little bit higher. Obviously, he still has a low floor because of the minutes situation, but if we find that he's going to play a more consistent amount of minutes going forward, that would definitely help. Though he sometimes doesn't shoot many balls, so that is one of the issues with him. But he is a rebounding guy, and he does have opportunity for double-doubles a lot of times. So I do think he's got some viability here. I also think his price will rise as we go forward. So he's not a must-play today again, but he is viable on the slate and somebody to consider. Then we're going to look at Josh Richardson for the Pelicans. Now, he is somewhat risky today, just depending on if he's going to play or not. But he's no longer on the injury report, so he looks like he's going to play. If McCollum was to miss, he could definitely end up starting even. But I don't expect him to play a big amount of minutes unless he does get into the start. But he's only $3,000, so he is somebody to consider here. He played really well for the Spurs, even off the bench, occasionally having some bad games. But overall, he is a little bit inconsistent. But his price at $3,000, depending on what kind of role you think he's going to have for the Pelicans, he might be a must play today. But if he starts, he'll definitely be a must play. Then we're going to look at Devontae Graham for the Spurs. Now, he's kind of in a similar situation where he has had 2 games here for the Spurs, and in those 2 games, he scored 42 and 26 fantasy points. With that said, it looks like he's going to play around 20 or so minutes a game for the most part, with all the guys back from injury, like they were last game. And if that's the case, then he should have some good upside in this situation. However, he does tend to be a streaky player. He doesn't exactly, light up the field every game. And so, as you can see through his backlog from this season, he's had games where he played 15 or 16 minutes and virtually did nothing. And so that is a little bit of a concern, but maybe he just likes his new team. But this is also a tough matchup here against Cleveland, so that is a little bit concerning. He's not a must-play either, but he is somebody that's viable on the slate and a cheap option to help fill out the lineup, especially if you want to pay up for some other guys. And then we're going to look at Colin Sexton for the Jazz. Now, his price has popped up, so he's no longer a must-play where he was at $4,000 for the first couple games of the post where he's starting now. And so as long as he continues to start and play 30 minutes, he's going to be viable, especially at a price point under $5,500 or so dollars. He has some nice upside. So I do think he's viable here. He's just not a must play because his price has come up quite a bit. Then we're going to look at some more expensive guys here. We're going to start with Jarrett Allen for Cleveland. Now, he's played pretty well lately. He's been more consistent than he normally is, which is nice. He hasn't had really many bad games lately, and it looks like he's feeling really good about himself, and he's gotten double-doubles quite a bit lately, I think in 6 of the last 7 games. So as long as he has that opportunity, he's going to have some upside here. His price is also not too bad. I mean, it's still pretty high for him, but he's been playing really well, and so as long as he's getting double-doubles most games, he's definitely somebody to consider on the slate as a good option, especially against a weak Spurs team that doesn't have anybody that's even capable of coming close to stopping him. Then we're going to look at Brandon Ingram for the Pelicans. Now, this is a little bit contingent based on if McCollum was to miss, his usage would skyrocket. But as long as he's under $8,000 with Zion out, he has some nice upside and potential, and so he fits into that mold today. And so I really do like him in this plus matchup against the Thunder, and I just think he's a good play on the slate. Then we're going to look at Jordan Poole for the Warriors. Now, he's had some upside since Curry's been out. Now, his price has popped up to where it should be, so he's not a must-play as a result. But he's still viable here. He has some nice upside. Obviously, he has 50 fantasy point upside and more. As long as Curry's out, he's going to play full complement minutes. If Wiggins ends up getting ruled out, that would actually give him a little bit of a boost as well. So he really has everything going for him in this matchup, especially against the Wizards, who don't have anybody that's going to be capable of guarding him. And I expect him to play well. And then we're going to look at the Philadelphia 76ers centers here. Embiid and James Harden, rather, is what I meant to say. So anyway, Embiid is questionable, and if he does play today, which I do think he will be viable on the slate at his price. He's been absolutely just dominating when he does play, playing 38, 39 minutes most games and having double-doubles for the most of the time and getting some blocks and steals as well. But if he doesn't play, that would make James Harden a must-play, basically, and he's played extremely well lately, especially when Embiid has missed this season. He's been really good. So I expect him to have a really good game, assuming that Embiid was to miss, then I'd definitely roll Harden into my lineup. So we'll just have to wait and see on that injury situation. But that's what I have here for DraftKings. Let's move over to FanDuel now. And look at our top plays here. We're going to start with LaMelo Ball. Now, he's a lot cheaper, and you're going to find that the more expensive guys are a lot cheaper on FanDuel today than they are on DraftKings, which is odd. But then the cheap guys are more expensive, so which is kind of funny. So it kind of balances out. But LaMelo Ball looks pretty solid today. He hasn't been quite as good the last few weeks as he was when he first started playing this year, but he still has some nice upside. And with some of the guys traded away, his usage has gone up the last couple games. So I expect him to play well, and I look for him to have a good opportunity here to have a good game. Jalen Brunson, also, price is just way too cheap for what he's been doing. He has 50 fantasy point upside here. He seems like a must play here on FanDuel at his price, especially in a nice matchup against Brooklyn, who no longer has Kyrie Irving and Durant and stuff. So I look for him to have a good opportunity here. Then we're going to look at Lauri Markkanen for Utah, who has been pretty good this season. Now that Vanderbilt's gone, he's even got more upside. He's played really well the last couple games, and I expect him to continue to get over 40 fantasy points, especially in a plus match against Indianapolis. Then Anthony Simmons. Now, I didn't like him as much on DraftKings as I do on FanDuel, but his price is a little bit about as high as I like it to be for him, even here. But he's still cheaper here than he is on DraftKings, and he has some upside with the situation there, especially against the Lakers. Like I said, for those top four guys, all of them are a lot cheaper than they are on FanDuel or on DraftKings, so they have a lot of viability here that they don't have on DraftKings. So then we're going to look at Jordan Clarkson, who starts the shift into getting more expensive to cheaper over here, but he's still too cheap here on FanDuel, so I really like him here. He's played really well the last game against the Knicks. Now he kind of capped out in his fantasy points because he didn't really get assists and stuff, which he doesn't always. But he's going to have more minutes now that people are gone and he's back from injury, and he has some nice upside as a result. And so I look for him to have a big game here. Then we're going to look at Colin Sexton, who's not as cheap here on FanDuel as DraftKings. He's actually quite a bit more expensive, but he still has some nice upside. And he has some viability on the slate because he is starting now, and he should have some, play over 30 minutes, and he tends to do pretty well in that role, especially in a plus matchup. Then we're going to look at Gordon Hayward for Charlotte. He has been playing really well as of late, though his floor still remains extremely low. But he should have more upside with some of the guys traded away from Charlotte, giving him a little bit more minutes and a little bit more of the usage. So we'll have to wait and see if that can continue, but I think it has some likelihood of doing so. Benedict Mathurin has played more minutes the last two games since all the trades happened, and so I look for him to have a viable option here. Now, he has a low floor, but he has a really good ceiling too at this price, and another guy that's a little bit cheaper here on FanDuel than he is on DraftKings. And then finally, Talon Horton-Tucker, who is $4,300 here. He's obviously a little bit more expensive than FanDuel than DraftKings, but as long as his minutes stay over 25 minutes, he's going to be almost a near must play at these low price points, and I expect him to rise up in price quite a bit as we go forward. So with that said, guys, thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below, and have a nice day, guys.